Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rex Rants. This movie happened. Hugh Jackman, what are you doing? I know your Wolverine gig may be up, and you still gotta pay the bills, but come on man, you've gotta pull yourself together. The Greatest Showman came out a month or two ago, and I was certainly not impressed. I've never seen such a poorly written movie in theaters since the Emoji Movie. So instead of The Greatest Showman, it turned out to be the almost mediocre but not even really that Showman.
Shut your mouth, you mediocre clarinet player.
Mediocre?
Now, there are many avenues I can take this. I can go over the hilariously fake singing, the forgettable songs, or the fact that it completely romanticizes P.T. Barnum and portrays him like some kind-hearted working-class hero who initially started by trying to scrape by for his family, when that is far from reality.
Alright, hey, I don't need this. I don't need this working-class hero crap.
This guy literally leased his own black woman and flaunted her around as George Washington's 160-year-old nurse to launch his career. Like, seriously, come on, of all the people you picked to make a musical about, P.T. Barnum? Either way, the main downfall of this movie that I'd like to address is its absolute failure of a conflict. Now, before I begin to tear the movie apart, I think it's important to define what exactly a conflict is. Well, one definition I found describes conflict as a literary element that involves a struggle between two opposing forces, usually a protagonist and an antagonist. Struggle comes in multiple kinds of forms: man versus man, man versus nature, man versus society, man versus self, and man versus technology. These all sound pretty self-explanatory, so now moving on. The conflict is a crucial part of a narrative. Conflict is pretty much the driving force of most narratives, and writing a good one snowballs the progression of writing your entire story. In order to create an engaging conflict, we need good protagonists to root for, an antagonist who provides the challenge, and a motivation to overcome the struggle. It's pretty much the steam engine that carries the rest of the film. It gets the pieces moving. So, of course, this is going to be a vital piece of any movie trying to present us with an engaging narrative. And thankfully, there is a plethora of great examples of conflict. In 12 Angry Men, you've got one juror who questions the 11 others on what seems like an open and shut case where a boy might face the death penalty. The Dark Knight gives us an ideological conflict between the Joker, who believes that people are just a mix of chemical reactions, willing to do anything under enough pressure, while Batman sees that people are more than the sum of their parts, and can be inspired to do good. Heck, even the Lego Movie shows the conflict between Emmett, who believes in creativity and individual choice, even if it means disorder, as opposed to Lord Business, who wants to control people for an orderly society. Us audiences can become really invested in these stories due to an interesting conflict that complements the characters, or what they're selling. Now, an example of conflict gone wrong. The not-so-Great Showman's main problem simply is how it doesn't know what it wants to be about. There is no central conflict that drives the narrative. Similarly to another trash movie, God's Not Dead, yeah, don't worry, I'll get to that one soon, the story is more structured like a children's television series in that there isn't one underlying struggle, but instead each episode has its own independent struggle. One episode is about delivering pizzas, while another displays the power of the almighty magic conch shell.
Magic conch shell? You mean like this?
Nothing seems to be connected, either by converging throughout the plot, or even through a common theme. There are just a bunch of completely random problems and messages going on throughout the movie that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. There's nothing like in the aforementioned Lego Movie, in which everything revolves around the theme of creativity, and creating something original, and being a shooting star or sticking to the mold. Okay, so I can vaguely complain about the film, but where are the examples? Come on, Tim Rex. Okay, well at first, The Greatest Showman seems to want to be about greatness from small beginnings, a lowly servant boy rising through the ranks to become, well, the greatest showman. Again, portraying Barnum as your everyman with a heart of gold, which is totally outlandish. But he's trying to prove his worth to his father-in-law and rub his success in his face. in which this can make for an interesting story, but the movie focuses on this sometimes. Only sometimes. Other times, it's about acceptance and caring for those who are different than you. We get this with Barnum's human attractions who want to be seen as normal people, and the romance between Zac Efron and Zendaya. Oh, okay, I know their characters have names, but who really cares? In which Zacky Poo is the son of a wealthy family that's into the arts, and Shake It Up Girl is a carny of color. This also would be a pretty fine direction to take this movie. Being about a circus, it seems easy to make it about seeing the humanity in those who you may think as odd. But then the film also wants to focus on Barnum's marriage and whether he may or may not be having an affair with opera singer Jenny Lin. But of course the film makes him not, because God forbid our protagonist isn't a perfect snowflake, even though this is P.T. Barnum we're talking about. Though their tour was a standout part of Barnum's career, this is easily the most detached of the subplots. But there's even a subplot about a critic who calls Barnum out for being fake, which could actually give us a unique perspective on someone who's actually been Harold Hilling it around New York.
The fellow sells bands, boys bands. I don't know how he does it, but he lives like a king and he dallies and he gathers and he plucks and he shines. And when the man dances, certainly boys. What else? The pipe of bass him. Yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. When the man dances, certainly boys. What else? The pipe of bass him. Yes sir. Yeah!
Sadly, this goes nowhere remotely interesting, besides the fact that valid critique is frowned upon because critics are always evil apparently. So overall, what we see here are just a bunch of disjointed plot lines mashed together in one 2-hour movie. It's like the writers couldn't agree upon what to make The Greatest Showman about, so they compromised to use every single one of their ideas into one mashed together production, and the outcome is laughable.
No one ever made a difference by being like everyone else.
You serious?
Even the climax of the movie falls flat. This should be the pinnacle of the conflict, where everything is coming to a head, the point of highest tension. But because there was really no main or underlying conflict, the climax just feels like another random occurrence in the string of random occurrences, as a group of protesters burn down their theater, only for it to be suddenly rebuilt for one last closing song. Ugh, this movie. I know that even though us critics trashed on this musical, while the fans overwhelmingly enjoyed it, but if you're someone who likes it, can you at least see why this fails on a writing level? There is no central conflict, and because there's no conflict, there's no adversary to rival our protagonist. There's no trial for them to face. There's nothing that causes us to cheer them on, and there's simply no emotional investment. To simply put it, conflict is the base of a good story, and without a strong base, the whole structure comes crumbling down. And that is why the less than mediocre showman fails. To all the fans out there, how many of you were actually thinking of this movie after the credits rolled? How many of you were thinking about this in the shower or when you were going to bed or during lunch? That's the key to a good movie and a good conflict. If you're thinking about the movie, the themes, and ideas when you're not even watching it, that's the sign of a good movie. It leaves its impact on you. That's where La La Land succeeds and the Lego Movie succeeds, but The Greatest Showman fails. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like and subscribe for more of this Tim X content. See you next week.